Hi, this is Scott Ware, the editor and publisher of Radiancemagazine, which can be found at radiancemagazine.org. And it's found in 660 locations in Southern California, a spiritual wellness magazine. And I have with me today someone who's been in the magazine, who's in the current issue, Katinka Soetens, who is well, first say hi, Katinka.
Hey, thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you all.
Thank you. And now you are a ceremonialist of the goddess and a co-organizer of the goddess conference, Priestess of Avalon, and a sacred sexual priestess of Rhiannon. Definitely a couple things I'm going to ask you about there.
Oh, great.
So you work internationally, teaching empowerment through goddess ceremonies, trainings and workshops to honor the spiral of life grounded in the indigenous spirituality of Avalon and the European lands. You also run a sacred sexual priestess of Rhiannon training for the Magdalene Mystery School in the UK and in other European countries. And you also teach, now this is interesting, a year-long men's soul quest journey, Path of the Lover, Brotherhood of Rhiannon.
That's right.
That's quite a bit. That's very interesting. And well, why don't we start there? If with all that, all those credits as far as with women with the sacred feminine, what you to men's soul quest?
Yes. For me, really, it's about, well, it's very multi-layered, this question could take up all our time, really. So the deeper levels of the inner integration are really not about a gender orientation or particularly about an expression of masculine or feminine, though they are very much experienced as such. And so as part of this ongoing journey really for myself and holding this place for others, there is just a part where once you get to a certain level of inner integration, it becomes so easy to be space holder for people of the opposite gender or the apparent outer opposite gender, because really the commonalities, the similarities that we share as human beings are so huge, are really the overriding factor. And then our uniqueness and our individual experiences, our gender experiences of life, are actually just completely fascinating and something to be honored and something to be explored in a healthy way. And what better way to do that but in groups where actually the opposite gender is also present, but in a very specific way, not around your own wounding or your own stuff or your unresolved issues or your anger or angst. Sure. So that's one layer of it. And then another layer is that working with a lot of women asked me, they said, what about the men? When are you going to do something for the men? When are you going to, bring this work to the men? And I was like, who am I? Who am I to do that? Right. And then who am I not to was the answer to the thing, So there's layers to this. Plus, Rhiannon, as she is a Welsh goddess, but she is a Celtic goddess, so she has resonance all over Europe, really. The Celts were a people that were linked through their mythology, their spirituality, and their languages, not necessarily race or place. Sure. And so their deities correspondent, and so Rhiannon is actually to be found in many, many areas in Europe, and of course in the whole of the British Islands. So she is a lover goddess on the Avalonian wheel in the Avalonian tradition. And so as beloved, she has the divine masculine as her beloved. Of course, she can also have female lovers. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about sexual preferences here. We're talking about this inner dance, really. And so to not work with men then becomes a little bit ridiculous, really. And then third layer to this, third layer to this is if you're working with facing the places where we perpetuate and participate in patriarchic power over structures, behaviors, thought forms, then you got to break down this dichotomy of dualism of, you know, men bad, women good, or them against us, and we cannot possibly meet because they are the perpetrators. This does not work as the path of love. So, a long answer.
Yeah, no, great answer. I appreciate the different layers. And I want to ask you more about the goddess Rhiannon, but I want to go back to what you said about the gender experience, because there are people who would say that there actually are no feminine or masculine characteristics in particular, that they're just human characteristics. And yet, as an experience in the gender, the male or female gender, it is a particular experience. So I would think getting the men together in a group, as many women are meeting together in circles and groups all over, and men, I think, are starting to now. What is it that you believe your experience in the female gender brings to the men you speak to on this in this event?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point, Scott. I think that, you know, I actually agree with both the things you said there. I think there aren't actually any particular traits that you could say, oh, that's masculine and that's feminine. Certainly not in the way that we tend to sort of on the surface layer think about this, you know, like male is strength and female is nurturing, soft. I don't believe that at all. They are human characteristics. And at the same time, living in a human body and experiencing a dualistic life experience in this world, you have different experiences through your hormonal orchestration, through your physical expression, through your, and this is leaving society's gender choices and privileges or otherwise out of the picture for now. Just the individual physicality of being either in a male body or in a female body does give a particular a life experience.
Sure.
So, and I do think that there are intrinsic qualities that we all have, because we all have this, what I would call inner masculine, inner feminine, no matter what form we are or identification we are, or if we're gender fluid, it doesn't matter. In the language to talk about this, we have both, hopefully integrated within us. There are specific qualities that are a taste of or have a sense of, yeah, that's masculinity and that is femininity. And
it's sort
they
of like
are,
when you see it, right?
Sorry?
As far as like with art and perhaps with masculinity and femininity, you know it when you see it or experience it.
Yes, I think it's like that. And it can be quite individual. It's not like the truth, you know.
Sure.
So as a woman who, you know, I've done a substantial amount of work on myself, and I am really dedicated to the path of love, which means that an ongoing self-development and self-inquiry. I'm certainly not a finished product at all. I have no desire to be mother to any other man or woman other than my own children. I mean, they are fantastic, and that's it for me, really,
Sure.
you know. So I hugely appreciate the human experience, and I have a lot of compassion for people's journeys. I also like to point out the places where story spins and repeats itself, and particularly finds its expression in relationship or in sexual behavior, which is a pretty clear lens for me to look through. So I bring those kind of tools, if you like, and
So
I can embody the sacred sexual feminine, and that magnetizes something in a men's group. And what I've learned from being in many, many women's groups and holding women's groups is that where the depth of sharing, once you sit in a circle and there isn't a sort of alpha vibration going on, the sweetness that opens is so beautiful. So I love facilitating places like that. And it's certainly not that everybody has to turn up for that, but there are men who are really wanting to work with, you know, the breaking down of the barriers of this masculine feminine standoff that we have in our societies and therefore in our lives and in our wounding history.
Yeah, and as you know, I facilitate a sacred masculine group here in Long Beach, California. And
Yeah, so
I try to
great.
bring in as many guest speakers as possible to bring more knowledge and wisdom of that. And I find that the more the sacred masculine, it's like we say, well, what is that? And how do I know if I'm embodying that? And I've learned that in society, many men and boys are not allowed to be, and girls and women for that reason, for that matter, are not allowed to be their true selves. They have to conform, and they have to sit in rows in school and be seen and not heard and follow the rules and all that. So their authentic self is not coming up. So if as
Mhm.
adults or at any point in our life, we can go back and reclaim our authentic self, let that rise to the surface and start living from that, I think the sacred masculine takes care of itself at that point.
I totally agree. And it's so beautiful, right? When we start choosing ourselves first and we stop making our intimate relationships about fixing our parent wounding, and we
Yes.
look after the wounded child parts in ourselves, and we
Mm-hmm.
really commit that we want to initiate as healthy, mature human beings. And therefore, these unintegrated or wounded places in us are no longer going to rule our behavior.
Sure.
And the projection lens has got to stop. That movie has got to stop running.
So,
Then
mhm.
all that does happen actually is the opportunity or the spaciousness for the arisal of that sacred masculinity, sacred femininity is already there. You don't have to do anything actually other
Mhm.
than that. But
Right.
that is, of course, the journey.
Yes.
Mm.
So if you're in a relationship and you mentioned something about it sounded like you were talking about using sexuality as a lens.
Mm.
And yes, if well, before we get to that, I guess the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that we have issues, that there are things at work, at play that we aren't fully in control of that can pop up to the surface, rule our emotions at times until we get conscious of it and work through it and commit to not taking these things out on the person we're in our closest relationships with.
Mm.
So I think that acknowledgement that even exists, that there are those dynamics at play inside of us, that's really important first, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, in a lot of this work, I think it's so important to have, men's groups for men and women's groups for women, where these places can really be explored or expressed perhaps for the first time ever and
Yes.
acknowledged. And
But that,
then reflected upon so that, okay, well, there's your pattern again, but in a really lovingly held space. Oh, well, haven't, you've tried that before and it didn't work. How could you do this more skillfully this time? Things
yes.
like that, when it becomes a sisterhood or a brotherhood, this becomes something that you actually want to lean into rather than shy away from. And it's
Right.
I think we all need help. None of us is actually capable of doing this on your own as such. There are different paths that have different methods for this, and it's all great as far as I'm concerned. And then at some point,
Actually,
there comes a point where you then come together as men and women, and that
mm,
may be a man stepping into holding a woman's group or a woman stepping into holding a men's group,
mm,
where, when your show is running, it's very different hearing that from a man in a loving, reflecting way who is not playing the game, who's not going to get seduced, who's not going to get manipulated, who's not going to get scared, who's not going to dance to your tune that you're so used to playing. And the
yes.
same for men with women. It's beautiful. It's a very beautiful, and again, the intimacy, the level of intimacy drops right in because, oh, okay, that's it. I'm seen and I'm still welcome, and on we go.
So that's the thing. I'm seen, I'm still welcome, which means you're in a relationship where you've decided, you understand there are dynamics that if you were not conscious of them, you would be running them, these dramas, in a never-ending loop until you figure it out. You're having fights, you don't even know why you're having fights, you can't figure it out until you do. And then you can say, okay, these are my dynamics. In a relationship, you want to be able to say, I'd like to trust you. I'd like you to trust me. Let's put it all on the table so we can get this stuff resolved so that we don't have to keep running these stories and these dramas so we can live a more peaceful, expanded life.
Mm.
And yeah, that's a beautiful place to be in. And then it's vulnerable, because then you want that trust with the other person, because shame is a part of the mix. And it
Oh,
feels really bad.
huge.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I really love all that you're saying there, and I'm sitting here, going, yeah, yeah. Yes, and this is where it gets really good. This is where it gets juicy, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot in there, really. So shame is this disabilitating way of shutting someone down that we then carry, because when shame and blame, they're the two tools, really. And shame is the most deeply wounding, because shame is the belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, which may be true or not true, but that's the belief held within. Whereas blame is that you have done something wrong, which is easier to walk away from and dance with than being wrong. So,
Right.
and then our vulnerability, this is our greatest strength. But again, it depends on how we interpret and understand the word vulnerability, because if it's vulnerability with fear, then that is not strength. That is a deeply traumatic place. Whereas if it's vulnerability with love, that is invincible.
Yes.
But it comes from the inside out, right? And so that these places where we're trying to fix I call them wounding places, that usually originate in our childhood, not because our parents were terrible, but because our parents were human and they made mistakes, or they were busy, or they did do things seriously inappropriate and wrong. Yeah,
Sure.
The whole full spectrum is there, and we try and fix this constantly in our outer relationship, instead of going in from the mature self to hold the inner child, not to fix it or heal it, just to hold it, and then to be able to share from that place of ownership. Hey, this is a part of me, here it is. I'm not going to try and hide. It's not wearing any masks. I'm not pretending it is not there. It is also absolutely not ruling me, but at times I can get really triggered in this.
Right.
Yeah? Then in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, you can step into a place where you can become each other's guardians, the guardianship of each other's vulnerable places.
Yep.
This does not mean parent, not mummy daddy, not healer at all, and not rescuer. It's the rescuer victim perpetrator dynamic we tend to get stuck in once we start doing this work, and it kind of feels safe once you find your little place in there. Oh yeah, now you figured it out, this is that and this is that. You're here and you're not moving, And it's actually not like that.
So would you say it's more?
It is, you need to change your life drastically. So the guardianship place is like from you, your heart, your choice, your commitment is to be the person who is not deliberately wounding that vulnerable place in the other person that you have had the privilege to see and meet.
Yes.
That's it. It's as simple as that. It's very beautiful.
And when you talk about not being the victim and the perpetrator, would you say it's about holding space for that person? And could you talk about what that is?
Yes, it is about holding space for that person. And I think to be with what is a great skill, an underestimated skill. We tend to run into the fear story of, oh, well, that happened once, so it will always happen again, or some projection into the future, or that's either glorious or dreadful.
Right.
And not in the now. Yeah. Oh God, she's having a drama again. This is going to go on for weeks. Whereas actually, if we can just be with this person in this moment, it might not last for weeks at all. So we have these ways of escaping being present with each other. So in that sense, yes, holding space. And then to really notice each other's pattern. So the victim place is very comfortable, Scott.
Yes.
Yeah, the victim place is a place where you never have to move from, and from which you can be deliciously, righteously angry at lots of things. So you get to feel your power, and you never have to go into your disempowerment that's underneath it. Plus, who can possibly tell you to move? Because poor you.
Exactly. And you can cite so many examples of why you are in this space and why everyone else should be as indignant as you are about your situation.
Absolutely,
Yes.
and let's have a crusade. And
Right.
and women do this a lot, actually. I mean, I am seeing this amongst men in the sort of collective as well, but women are particularly good at this because there is this having to own the victim place in a patriarchic system that has placed, in general, women below men. So
Sure.
if you are not meeting that, there is a time to meet that and to own that and to discuss that and to express that. But if you then don't shift, so if you can't go there, you're in the freeze or in the denial. But if you get stuck there, nothing moves. And then it's like, let's go and castrate anything that's male because they're the perpetrators, and then we get rid of the problem that way. And anyway, they're the inferior ones. I mean, I hear this in the more extreme,
of course,
voices of the
discussion groups online.
The majority just actually want to meet. We actually just want to meet, and the need to be fixed in our victim, to be rescued, or to these the wounding places or the shadow place of the archetypes. If we're princesses, then we know that life owes us a lot, and we wait to be rescued. We don't cut off our hair, not together and climb out of the tower. We wait for the one. Yes. And then the one better be precisely as we hope and dream him to be. Because if not, then that's great betrayal. And great betrayers get punished. Yeah. So these places are actually there in the fairy tales, in the mythologies, for us to look at, for us to look into that mirror, that magic mirror, and to hunt our shadows, to really trace into these places so we can own them and say, hey, am I actually a free being? Do I choose to still behave in that way? Is it happening now? Can I be present in the now? Is this real now? Okay, no, it's not actually real now. So, okay, how do I choose to act and think?
And to get to that place where we're actually asking those empowering questions from that victim mentality, I guess what happens generally to create that pathway is life tends to beat you up a little bit.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Okay. And you start to suffer, and you go one of two ways. You can either go more into victim mode and say, see, I'm proving my point here because of all the calamity I'm facing. Or you say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's another way. I'm hearing things. I'm seeing other people who are happy in relationships and whatnot. Why can't I have that? Then they start an inquiry, and that's the opening. And then what you focus on expands, and you keep moving and moving in that direction. And then one of those things I think you do, you help people with, is what you just alluded to, which is shadow hunting. Can you explain what shadow hunting is?
Yes, so shadow hunting is a shamanic term. And so if you were to be stuck in your story of why is this, and it's usually a drama, so I put on the voice, why is this never happening to me? Things never work out for me. Why can I not have what I really want? I've worked so hard. I've waited so long. That kind of thing.
Oh my God, be careful. I'm feeling like I want to rescue you right now.
Oh gosh. Oh no, please don't be a white knight.
No more.
Thank you for doing that work, Scott.
Yep, done.
And noticing. That's all we need to do. So that, And these places are, they're more subtle levels of these places. We're making a little bit of a theater here, but, that's, yeah. So in our relationship and sexual experiences, particularly our consensual sexual relationships, mirror, the common denominator is ourselves. So if we see a repeating pattern, the place to look is in ourselves. It can't be that you attract every single utter useless narcissist. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And you are choosing there, or yes, of course you are attracting, but you are attracted to something. There's a shadow dance attraction between people. There is a lot of shiny soul attraction, and then there is a strong element of shadow attraction. And the more work you can do your own shadow, the less that has to be a part of your relationship dynamic.
So what are some... Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. In the work that I do, in circles, we look at the story and we listen for the story that spins and spins, like the drama story just now. Yeah. And you cut through it and you hunt into the places underneath it. And we encourage our students to become stalkers of ourselves, hunters of ourselves. Yeah. Yes. Not to kill. We are not into killing. We are into loving.
Sure.
So these places need our attention. The reasons why they are so up in our behavior and in our conscious, in our thought forms, is because they need attention. So what part feels in the drama? What part feels unmet? What part feels unloved? Where does that come from? Where have you felt that before? And then we work with archetypes and shadow archetypes to give that a particular form so that it's much easier to engage with and to create a relationship with, really, and to spot it.
I was going to ask you for specific examples, but instead I'm going to give a specific example from my life. I'm going to get vulnerable here, because I just made a joke a few moments ago about feeling an urge to rescue, and that is something I've done, and it's something I've done in the past, and whether it was in romantic relationships or not, but I did follow that thread. So, a lot of times in these conversations, people talk about things in general terms like we're doing, but I think it's instructive to get specific. So I'm going to say that, for a long time when I was young, I wanted to please my mother. Yeah. And so many of these things go back to mother and father, right? It's just, it doesn't sound that attractive. It's not, it is what it is, though. And I wanted to make her laugh. I wanted to help her or free her up from whatever misery or whatever she was going through.
Suffering, yeah, for sure.
Suffering. And there was also dynamics coming my way, and I was fielding that. And everyone has a slightly or a different story, or even just maybe a slightly different story. But I do know that created a dynamic in me to want to recreate that, and only until I conquered that or was able to name it, face it, and have it just dissolve in front of me was I then able to have freedom in relationships.
That's right.
Or specifically a relationship, and that, otherwise before though, and it could have seemed like a romantic comedy. Maybe a lot of romantic comedies are that underneath. A lot of people complain about them for various things because there's something not complete about it. It's only the beginning of the story, because actually the next part of the story after the movie ends is, okay, we need to unravel that because there was something wrong about the way you rescued me in that whole, there's a romantic thing, but just because it's been unexplored. And anyway, so I would prefer to have the freedom on the other side of it rather than that part, because there's still romance to be had in that freedom.
Oh, completely. In fact, you get a deeper romance. So again, we live in this society that loves illusion and that perpetuates illusion and that actually glorifies and makes desirable, and something like we should strive for it, the shadow aspects. So there's a big confusion, and I use language, and we could argue about semantics. I'm just using words because they work on the wheel I work with as archetypes that are initiation gateways at different stages of life.
Yes.
So the rescuer is not romantic and desirable. The rescuer actually
wants to be rescued.
What?
Actually, the rescuer wants also to be rescued.
Oh, completely. The rescuer is avoiding the part of him or herself that actually needs rescuing by rescuing on the outside.
Yes.
By seeking the person who is most saying, rescue me, rescue me. Yeah, and this can be really full on. This can be drug addicts or alcoholics or people who are in absolute dire state of denial. Being in their own body even,
Yeah, and when you do rescue someone under those circumstances, it's not free of attachment. You want something in return.
Oh, for sure. And also, one of the things you want in return is not having to deal with your own things. It's perfect, sure. The perfect way of staying in avoidance, of having to go in to rescue the place in you that needs rescuing.
Right.
So say, for example, somebody who carries a lot of sexual abuse in their history, of which there are many people, women, yes, but also men, there is a lot of that. If you want to rescue them and love them and heal them, then you never have to deal with your own sexual desires or your own sexual aversions, because, sure. Hey, you are rescuing someone. Yeah. So this is an example of this kind of dynamic in quite a sort of gross, as in, on the big picture way. And it can have subtle layers that where do you want the pleaser? The pleaser is a form of the rescuer, really.
Yes.
So yes. On the masculine wheel, this is a shadow form of the hero. So the two shadow forms of the hero that we work with are the Dark Knight, who is the destructive perpetrator, if you like, who uses his power to take, and the White Knight, who is the rescuer.
Right.
Yeah. And he self-sacrifices and is the provider until he drops dead, but he's also actually not present. They both sit on these big horses. They're not on the earth. They are slightly detached from the reality of earth living. Right. They're so on their mission that they miss actually being fully in their body and fully in life. And so the hero actually is very much grounded. That's how you are a hero, you are the protector by having the protection of the earth.
Well, and the rescuer also is just not connected, like you said, and is also, like we said, getting a lot out of the rescuing that is causing the avoidance. And
yeah, it makes you feel great. And yes. Maybe in your beautiful example was maybe you finally got to make her smile, right? Never managed it as a little boy, but hey, there you go, you got a smile. How exactly. You made her happy. Might have been for 5 minutes, but hey,
Exactly. And the insidiousness of that, though, is what the White and the Black Knight or the Dark Knight are doing matches what society thinks a man should do in a relationship with. Yeah. So it looks, I think I'm doing the right thing, and the romantic comedy says I'm doing the right thing, but actually there's no truth or authenticity happening here at all.
That's right. Made her happy, which was never your responsibility to begin with.
That's right.
Her happiness is hers. Your happiness is yours. You get to share happiness. It's not up to the other person to make you happy.
Correct.
If you are not happy with another person, look at the why. What's going on there? So yes, absolutely. The insidiousness of our society that romanticizes and makes desirable, like this is what you aim for, it is actually incredibly disempowering, and it absolutely cuts off our access to our sexual life force. We are detached, ungrounded from the full owning and expressing of that by being in these shadow forms of the healthy archetype.
So what is true sacred sexuality? What does that look like, feel like, as opposed to non-sacred sexuality?
So one of the things that has to be in there is authenticity. It is a dance of surrender and presence. So you have to choose well who you're having the dance with. You cannot let any of the hungry or scared places make that choice.
You mean the hungry and scared places inside of me?
Oh, totally. Yes.
Right.
Yes. And then, so authenticity is great. Most people have zero idea or very little idea of what their authentic yes or no actually is. Because we're all in the enchantress or the white knight or the rescuer or the victim or the seductress or the point scorer. Sorry, Scott?
Would you say we're addicted to it?
Yeah, well, there is an addictive element to that, yes. When it comes to sexuality, we're very goal-oriented. We're certainly addicted to that.
Okay. And you said the authentic yes and the authentic no. How do we find that out in ourselves, what that is?
By really hunting ourselves, where that
Mm.
yes and no comes from. Usually we're buying something or avoiding something. Until we start doing this work of really integrating and getting to know ourselves and saying, oh, look, that's my little scared girl who wants to be liked. She wants to be chosen. You know, wow, he's chosen me. Do I actually choose him? You know, that's not a question that enters into that part of me.
Sure.
You know, so it is that journey of self-discovery and self-empowerment that brings you into these places of integration where you at least have some awareness of the parts of you that are not they're not authentic.
Sure.
So authenticity, presence and surrender, which sounds easy, it's a beautiful dance.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of work. Yeah, to be truly present, most people are not ever really present. You have to have a core of surrender. Otherwise, you are in an agenda.
And the agenda
if you
is
are
usually
truly surrendered, you have to have a core of presence. Otherwise, you're not home. You're out of your body.
And that means the ego is running the show, which is based on fear and the conditioning from when you were growing up, usually, as opposed to letting that ego just calmly go to the side and letting your true essence come out.
Absolutely. You know, fear, anger, greed, those kind of base egoic drives, which are survival drives. There's actually, in principle, nothing wrong with them. They're like, I don't know, like dragons. If you can ride the dragon, great. Don't be ruled by the dragon, eaten by the dragon, burned by the dragon. That's not so great, you know.
I like that. That's a good quote. That's a good one. I find it useful to use the terms attachments versus connections, whereas attachments are unhealthy with another person and connecting with people are healthy. And it's very interesting to just sort of tap in and honestly ask ourselves, do I have attachments with this person? And by attachments, sort of, we have a cord with a hook on the end and like, I hooked that person, or someone's hooking me right now. I'm feeling that, or this person's hooking me, as opposed to, can't I just have a beautiful flowing connection with any person in your life, whether it's a relative, a lover, a friend? Do you use that distinction?
Yes. Well, I think I've just had this long conversation about the word attachment with my partner who is on a Buddhist path. And so he's a Buddhist. Because in English, I don't know if it is the same in American, attachment is actually, in normal language, is actually a good thing.
Oh.
It means like that you care. Of course you're attached to your children or to your land or to your beloved or...
I see.
It's like you care, you know, attachment. And so when I hear this terminology come up, which, you know, comes from Buddhism, really, the non-attachment teachings, I have an issue with that because it's like, well, actually we're meant to be attached. And then so he explained to me that actually what you could also translate that word as, because they're not actually English words to begin with, is grasping. And then a more strong form of grasping, fixation. And so grasping and fixation, I really get. So yeah, this is not a healthy way because we can like being hooked and we can like hooking, but these are grasping and fixating really, as opposed to what you're speaking into, which is this beautiful freedom of connection, of authentic relating. And if you bring that into your sexuality, then that can actually open into a dance of experiencing the divine energy in your sexual connection with someone, in yourself, in the other person, and between the two of you into something that is more than that.
Okay.
So yes, I would agree. It was again a long answer.
No, it's perfect. I love it. I have one more big question for you, but I want to let people know they can reach you at herpathoflove.com. Herpathoflove.com. And I assume you have workshops, and I assume you have things online. And what do you do for people in the States or across the pond and around the world? What kinds of services do you offer in that way?
Well, that's great. It's great you asked that, Scott, because so I offer Skype sessions for individuals and for couples. But also I am actually coming to California in October to give a workshop and a talk at the Orange County Goddess Temple Women's Center.
Museum of Women.
Museum of Women, yes. So I'm coming there in October, and I'm going to start running the Priestess of Love, Priestess of Rhiannon, Sacred Sexual Priestess training in California as well from next year. I think that would start in March, and that's going to be 5 4-day intensive training sessions over sort of 2 years. So that will end in 2021.
That you'll be doing here in the States?
Yeah, I'll be here, and I will be open to do sessions or offer additional evenings or day workshops, depending on how the schedule will fill up. But so, yes, I will be in California. I'm so looking forward to coming and seeing your beautiful land.
Absolutely, yes. And so what kind of woman would be interested in the Sacred Sexual Priestess of Rhiannon training? What can they expect if they enter this sort of training?
Again, great. You ask really good questions, Scott.
Oh,
thank you. So there is a resonance which is ancient, which is an archetype or a soul calling or something that comes from far away in the past, maybe, that we are called to, that awakens us, that attracts us, that draws us to sacred sexuality, and then particularly to these memories or these ideas about what sacred sexual priestesses may have been like, and what would that have meant, because it certainly wasn't prostitution. You cannot combine the word sacred and prostitution together. It's a no-go. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
Prostitution is always derogative, even if it's freely chosen to be engaged with or entered into. And this is the sacred sexual energy is the opposite of that. So there's something around an ancient memory or something around stepping through this patriarchic ownership of people's bodies, people's sexuality, of making it gratuitous and base and about instant fix and nothing about heart connection. So really connecting the life force, the sacred life force, that is a big drive. And lust is a big drive, and in itself there is nothing wrong with desire, lust, but it causes a lot of havoc if you selfishly pursue it. But if you bring it up to the heart, if you connect it to the heart energy, this transforms. So it is a journey around awakening sexual energy and experiencing the body and your life force, sexual energy as sacred within your body, connecting it to the heart. And then there is a working in a very deep healing way around sexual issues, sexual inadequacies or ideas of wounding or inexperience or bad experience that we work with. Again, through this way of just really honoring the physicality of the body and honoring the journey. And then there is a way of, there is a part that is about journeying through the houses of initiations. Like we talked about a little bit about archetypes and their shadow form. Right. Most have not had healthy initiations at all, at any of the important stages of change in our life.
Sure.
And so to bring this back means that there is a development in the human being, psychologically, sexually, physically, a homecoming to yourself in a healthy form where these shadow places don't have to rule you anymore. These hurt places can come home to the heart, can be fully fed by life force. No more cutting off of the two, no more halfway, you know, underneath the heart somewhere, you cut off, and the lower base, nasty, dirty, earthy, sexy body is bad, but we want it, but it's bad. And the heart is good, you know, the mind is wonderful. A far more holistic way of actually working with the whole being, initiating through the 8 houses of initiation on the wheel of life, into a greater understanding of self. And then owning it frees up sexual energy. It is not actually about necessarily sharing it with anyone else, though it will both enhance your relationship and challenge relationships that are stuck in particular patterns. So the training is a challenge, and it attracts people for all these different reasons: as a sacred healing journey, as a spiritual path, as a way of serving Goddess, the great feminine divine in all her forms, in this particular form of the lover goddess, the goddess of love. What does that mean? How does she call you? What does that show up in your life when you hear her? I mean, when I say hear, it's not necessarily like a voice is talking in your ear, though it can be. It's more this kind of a knowing, a longing, and not quite knowing where or what. Well, this may be a place to come and explore that inquiry.
In these times, is there something different about these times as opposed to being born in other times, where we're able to do more, expand more, experience more in these human forms?
Yeah, I think we're all very fortunate. Those of us talking here and listening, I'm going to say we're in golden lives compared to kind of lives that other people are having at this time in the world. And so how did we get so lucky? You know, were we good little boys and good little girls in the last life? Is that your thought form around this, or what? You know, I don't know. I don't have the answer, by the way. But I do think there is a responsibility to having a golden life, which means that if you can't do the work now, if you cannot do the inner work now, then when can you? Because when you're in a survival life, it's much harder. You know, it's so much harder. So the inner work, if we do it now, and when I say golden life, I don't mean to belittle or undermine or underestimate hardship that people experience that gets them, that propels them onto the path, like you were saying. Sometimes life gets tough.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people are experiencing tough times. So I think both we have greater freedom than we've ever had before, and at the same time there's greater threat to those freedoms and to the beauty of our life, the beauty of our planet, environmental disaster looming on the not so far horizon, and the rising of far-right political movements in all liberal countries. We have to rise. You were talking about the higher vibration of positivity, to bring in that light, or however you want to experience and express that. If you can't do it now, then when are you going to do it?
Right. This is the time.
This is the time. We are alive in this time for this reason, or this is my belief.
Yes.
You know.
Katinka, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. It's been wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back, Scott. It's been delightful to talk with you again.
Thank you. And we can find you at herpathoflove.com.
That's right.
And I'm the publisher of Radiance Magazine at radiancemagazine.org. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott, and good luck with the magazine.
Thank you.